If you clicked on this video, chances are that you are looking to improve your communication. And so you've come to the right place. Today we're going to be talking about the core reason why smart people struggle to articulate how they think. Hi, if you're new to the channel, my name is Matt. I'm currently working in strategy and ops at Google. And before that, I was a management consultant. But I make these videos because I enjoy it. And if you're still with me, make sure you lock in, full screen the video, turn off the notifications, and follow along. Broadly speaking, when we think about translating thoughts to speech, or vice versa, what you have to understand is thinking is not the same as speaking. Speaking is a form of communication, but as we know, there are many different ways to communicate your thoughts, which include things like writing or speaking. But communication at its core is simply translating whatever is going on in your head into words that somebody else with oftentimes a different level of context can understand. And so it's really important to understand that concept because you could be the smartest person out there, or you could be an expert who's spent over a decade in a very technical field, or you could be the person who understands all the ins and outs and all the details of a particular piece of software. But at the end of the day, if you're unable to take all of that knowledge in your mind and communicate it, aka transmit it to another person or say a group of people, then you're just not going to be very effective. And so this is a skill that literally anyone can benefit from. And it doesn't matter if you're a technical person, like an engineer, or you're non-technical and you work in business, or if you're a student right now looking for a job, or you're an early stage professional already in the workforce. Improving your communication skills and your ability to articulate your thoughts is something that you can always be improving on. But let's get into the analogy. So I want you to imagine that the thoughts you have in your mind are like a bucket of water or a sink full of water. And so let's say you have a lot of ideas and thoughts in your mind about a particular idea that you want to present to your boss, for example. Now, in an ideal scenario, you're able to effectively transmit the ideas and information to the listener's mind and do so in a way that they're able to receive the most important bits of your message and they receive all of the necessary context to fully comprehend what you're trying to say. So successful communication is essentially when you can take all of this knowledge and move it all over here so that the listener's mind also understands ideally to the same level as you. But in most cases, what actually ends up happening? We go to someone and we try to explain them some problem that we've been working with or some solution that we've just found. And we have been spending all day working on this thing. Maybe we've been spending weeks on this thing. We're up to here in context and background on the topic, whereas they have very little context, very little background on this particular topic. And so we attempt to transmit all of the information and to communicate it effectively to them, but for some reason they don't understand, or they have lots of questions and they have this very puzzled look on their face because clearly you didn't communicate it properly. Now, what is actually happening though? What's happening is there's some kind of a blockage in the pipe, and there are many different things that can contribute to this blockage, but essentially the blockage is preventing you from communicating the idea to that person. And maybe they're only getting a few drops of knowledge instead of the full picture. And that is why they are confused or that they don't fully understand. Now, what causes this kind of mental blockage though? Because you have all of the thoughts in your head, right? So why aren't you able to translate all of those thoughts into an effective verbal message? Well, there's a lot of different things that can contribute to it, as I said, but a few key ones that I want to touch on that I think are particularly relevant for smart people or people who work in highly specialized or technical fields is things like poor and irrelevant word choice, the curse of knowledge, which I'll talk about as well, and a lack of structure when you're actually speaking. And so let's talk a little bit about each of these. So with this first one, poor and irrelevant word choice. What I find is this is a problem that people face if they work in a field or in a job that requires them to have a lot of context. Maybe there's a lot of acronyms that are used because there are a lot of big words or company-specific jargon that you are using on a day-to-day basis. And so to you, it's like second nature. Say, for example, you work in payments, and so you know that MTUs and MAUs and FTs mean monthly transacting users, monthly active users, and first transactions. But if you're going to some executive who doesn't understand payments at all, how on earth do you expect them to know what you're talking about? And in many cases, they won't, because they'll have a much higher level understanding and much less context than you do. But to you, because it's just second nature to throw out these acronyms left and right, you presuppose that this person knows what you're talking about, when in reality, there's actually a blockage here, and they're not understanding the message as you understand it. Now that is just one example, but in other cases, the words that you're using may not be effective. So maybe you're choosing the wrong words to actually describe the problem. And so it's really important here to be thoughtful about your word choice, because you don't want to simply use big words so that you sound intelligent. I think that's a huge mistake. It is much better to explain things in very simple terms where a high schooler or a middle schooler could understand what you're talking about without having to resort to industry jargon or fancy vocabulary. I've talked about this in previous videos, but you want to have a first principles understanding of a concept before you go and try to explain it to someone, especially if it's a very complex or technical concept, because one, it's going to help them understand it more effectively, especially if they have less context than you. But two, it's just also going to ensure that you actually understand the very thing that you are trying to explain, which is core to being able to articulate your thoughts effectively. Now, the second thing here is the curse of knowledge. And this is kind of related to the acronym example that I just gave. But the curse of knowledge essentially is when intelligent people or people who have been in a particular field for a long time, maybe you're at the top of your game, you're an expert in biotechnology, or you are a professional athlete, for example. There are a lot of things that you understand that other people don't, which you think other people know. And it's very easy to assume that people know more than they do when you have been spending so much time studying or thinking about a particular topic. And so the curse of knowledge is when we forget that things that to us feel like common sense. Like, oh yeah, of course I should stretch before I go for a run. Or, oh yeah, of course I should version up the PowerPoint deck before I make any new changes to it. Things that might seem like second nature to someone like you or me are oftentimes not that obvious to other people. And so if there's anything that you take away from this, it's that you cannot assume that everyone has the same level of context as you. And in many cases, you're better served assuming a lower level of context among your audience than you. It's always easier for you to start with assuming very low context, and then once you realize, oh, maybe the audience is a little bit more knowledgeable, then you can adjust upwards. Versus if you start by assuming a much higher level of context, then you've lost the audience and their understanding and attention from the beginning. And so remember the curse of knowledge and never assume that they have more context than you do. The third and final thing I want to talk about here is lack of structure when you actually are communicating your thoughts. And so maybe you have all of this knowledge in here, and maybe you have all these great ideas, but they're all jumbled up. And when it comes to comprehension as a listener, what do you think is easier for someone to understand? If you throw out 5 different ideas in non-sequential order, just kind of randomly, or if you structure those 5 ideas so that the way that they follow each other is logical and actually makes sense. The second one, of course. So the next time you have to explain something that is complex or even simple, it's always better to try and take a little bit of time beforehand and structure out your thoughts and how you actually want to deliver the message. And so to give you some really actionable tips here, you always want to understand what your objective is and what you want from the other person. CTA stands for call to action. Because when you say go into a meeting with someone, or you go into, say, a presentation, the worst thing is if you don't make it clear up front what you're trying to get from the presentation, specifically from the audience. So if you go to a senior level executive, for example, and you don't have a clear call to action as in, okay, today we're doing this and we're going to show you this analysis and we want you to give us feedback on these 3 things. If you don't do that, then you're basically forcing them to take on more mental load to think about, okay, he is presenting this thing to me and it seems like he wants feedback on this, but I'm not sure, so maybe I have to ask him another follow-up question. So if you can preempt that by 1, making it very clear what the objective is, and then 2, at the end of your presentation or at the end of the meeting, making it very clear what the next steps are, you'll not only be much more productive, but you'll also be seen as a better communicator and a more effective individual. The second thing is always err towards top-down communication. You don't want to be working bottoms up in most cases. Let me explain to you why. Especially if you're talking to a senior audience or even in an interview, for example. You always want to start at the 10,000-foot level. And you want to remind people of what the core problem or core objective of this meeting or interview is. And then you want to bring up supporting evidence 1, 2, and 3, and then maybe go even a level further if you're asked to provide additional detail. But you never want to start with the nitty-gritty details first because it's unclear to the listener from the beginning what the main idea is. And you're basically forcing them to try and think of it themselves as you go through. And so in most cases, if you are trying to articulate some kind of idea to someone, you're much better served being very upfront about, okay, today I want to explain to you why I think we need to talk to sales to address this declining revenue problem. And then go into reason 1, reason 2, reason 3, supporting evidence 1, 2, and 3 under reason 1, supporting evidence 1, 2, and 3 under reason 2, etc. You get the idea, right? Instead of talking about supporting evidence 1, 2, and 3, and then going up to reason 1, and then going up to the high-level recommendation, because, again, you want to save people time, and you also want to save them mental load when it comes to having to think about, okay, what is he explaining to me, and why is he saying these things to me? Why is he telling me these very detailed and very specific things? And so keep that in mind as well. But ultimately, taking a step back here, again, if you just understand that fundamentally, poor communication is not a matter of having poor thoughts. And in many cases with smart people, your thoughts are highly relevant and maybe you've spent a lot of time thinking about a particular problem, and so you have valuable things to communicate. But when it comes to actually delivering the message to your audience, you need to make sure that you minimize the amount of mental blockage so that when you articulate your thoughts, the words and the way that you're delivering the message is clear, is concise, and is easily understandable to your audience. But anyways, I hope that this was helpful. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and I'll see you guys in the next one.